Everyone, and thank you very much for attending our meeting this morning. As chair of the Housing Advisory Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. On March 5th, 2021, public notice that this meeting was posted on the town website and on the bulletin board of the town offices at 10 Front Street. As provided in that public notice, the public may access this meeting online and via telephone. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. I'm going to start the meeting by taking roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with them during this meeting and who that person is, which is required under the right to know law. So I'll start with myself. I'm Nancy Belanger. I am the chair and secretary of the Housing Advisory Committee, and I am alone in the room. Pete Cameron.
Pete Cameron, Planning Board Representative, and I'm alone in my room.
Lovey Roundtree. Olaf.
I'm here, but not alone. I have kids who are working school remotely, so they'll be around.
And you are our select board representative.
Yes.
Thank you. Let's see who else I'm missing. Bear with me just 1 minute. Darren, I'm going to have you introduce yourself.
Darren Winham, Economic Development Director, Town of Exeter.
Thank you.
I'm by myself.
Thank you. Dave Sharples.
My spacebar button didn't work. Dave Sharples, town planner. I'm in the office alone.
Good
Morning, David.
I know 3 of us were on our meeting last night. So Robert Prine.
Yes, Rob Prine from the Rockingham Planning Commission. I'm in the room alone.
Sarah
Reitzman, Director of the Workforce Housing Coalition. I am in the room alone.
Okay, I'm not seeing Lindsay yet, so we'll let her introduce herself at some other point if she pops on. Okay, so I'm going to just start by saying we're going to skip over our meeting minutes until after our guests have a chance to talk to us. And I would like to thank them for their time this morning. And I'm going to hand this over to Darren Winham to introduce them.
Well, thank you, Nancy, and thank you guys, everybody, for being here. The last time I was here, we had brought in 3 businesses that had workforce housing issues or workforce issues. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that the housing prices are so high around here that their workers just can't find places. And they're coming from so far away. And a lot of times they just say, skip it, and they get a job closer to home. And that's just been a problem. Those industries are more manufacturing. So you guys asked me to get something more service oriented to see how it's affecting them. To that end, we have Matt Burke, the owner of Las Olas. We have Gina Dickinson, a Senior Director of Human Resources at Riverwoods Exeter. And we have Rachel Ela with a title so long, I'm going to let her tell you. And I'll, in fact, let her start. So what I'd like to do is just go 1, 2, 3 and have you folks talk about what the workforce housing issue on the Seacoast means to your business. So thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Darren. Good morning, everyone. I am Consumer Banking District Manager for Cambridge Trust. My office is based out of Stratham, but we have 21 offices between New Hampshire and Massachusetts. 6 of those offices are located in New Hampshire. So preparing for today, I spoke with a couple different levels of our organization. Our offices are made up typically of 4 staff members, an office manager, assistant office manager, and 2 client advisors. The client advisors are our entry-level positions. They're a combination of a teller as well as customer service that would open an account for you or what have you. Those individuals make roughly $20 an hour, depending on experience. And what we have found is the majority of our client advisors are coming from the Rochester, possibly Dover area, although it feels like Dover is starting to get priced out. We actually had a client advisor who, because of COVID, was displaced from her lease situation, and she had to scramble very quickly and ended up in Rochester. Those client advisor positions, and please cut me off, I'm just kind of talking off of prepared remarks. So if there's questions, I'm happy to answer them. So those client advisor positions that we have, and we have 2 open right now, it takes us 3 to 6 months at times to fill those roles. While we're so close to Massachusetts, it does not make economical sense to, if someone is living there, to pay the tax and then come over the border to us. So we don't have access to those positions. Meanwhile, some of our, because the pay rate can be higher for our competitors down south, we may have people who might have been candidates for our role go to a Massachusetts institution for that same role. I also spoke to one of our managers who is much more higher on a pay grade, and he commuted for about 1.5 years from Hooksett because he had done the math, and for a 2-bedroom apartment, in Hooksett, the math worked out where it made more sense for him to commute from Hooksett to our Dover office in order until he relocated, because housing in the Seacoast area simply is not an option. So that's really the overview. When I'm thinking about it, it really does create a strain on the banking world in general, because I am not alone in what our institution is experiencing. Banking is a very small community, and we all talk, and we all have openings like this with that same time frame. So that's really it from my thoughts. Can I answer any questions?
I think what we'll do is we'll go through all 3, if that's all right, and then we'll go to questions. Does that work for everybody? Gina, you all set to go next?
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Special good morning, Mr. Cameron, our Riverwoods Exeter resident. And I am the Senior Director here of Human Resources at Riverwoods Exeter. I'm here in my office. Our office space for our leadership team here is located right in one of our Exeter communities. We have 3 communities here in Exeter alone, and we have expanded quite a bit over the last 6 years or so with the build of our Riverwoods Durham community. And we also have an affiliation with a Birch Hill community in Manchester. And what's interesting is our recruiting needs here differ very much from the Durham and the Manchester communities. The demographics are very different. Our Durham community is right up the street from UNH. And so it really highlights the need for the affordable housing here in the Seacoast area, because we struggle quite a bit to fill our positions. It's much more of a struggle for us than it is for the Manchester or the Durham communities. We have, we're a healthcare organization, so we are a nonprofit continuing care retirement community, so CCRC. We're one of a few nationally accredited CCRCs. And so what that means is residents move into our community, very vibrant, living independently in their own apartments or cottages. And as they age or their medical needs increase, we have healthcare options. And we provide healthcare starting with assisted living and all the way through skilled nursing. So we provide the continuum of care as people need that. Our nursing assistants come in at a wage of $14.50 an hour. That's an entry-level wage for right out of your LNA certification program. And then, of course, we have, a tier and wage grid as they gain experience. It's impossible to live in this area on a $14.50 an hour wage. And we've had, over the last couple of years, increased competition with for-profit healthcare organizations that are providing nursing home type services as well. And then, of course, hospitals that can offer, Monday through Friday, no weekend hours in a lot of those positions. So we do tend to attract quite a bit employees who have families, because we do provide 24/7 care. So a mom, for example, can work an 11 to 7 shift and still be available during the day if she has young children and, family demands there. So we do find a diverse demographic with our workforce here. We have either the very mature employee who's maybe in the last third of their career and looking for something different from maybe a doctor's office or a hospital setting. Or then we also have what seems very appealing to some of our younger employees, maybe just coming right out of high school, unsure what they want to do next. Maybe college isn't for them. They tend to gravitate towards our housekeeping positions because we provide facility services as well. And those positions start at an entry-level wage of $14 an hour. So overall, our opportunities for career here, we have a few focused areas of operation, and they would be the healthcare area, which obviously is the nursing career path. We have facilities, which has career paths in housekeeping, maintenance, and overnight security, and landscaping. We do our own landscaping on site as well. And then we have dining. Those are our 3 largest departments, and our dining provides services, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So those are the career opportunities that the departments that we offer. We tend to appeal to the high school student for our dining opportunities. They're working in the dining rooms when we're not in COVID times, and we have our dining room open. So that gives you a high-level overview. And we also have quite a bit to offer is in the way of our administrative office positions. We don't have trouble recruiting for those positions, but we do tend to attract, I would say, more so for our dining facilities and healthcare. As Rachel mentioned, we tend to attract quite a few employees from the Stafford County area. And then as competition opens up closer to home in those areas, we tend to lose some people so that they can work closer to home.
Excellent. Thank you, Gina.
Thanks.
How about you, Matt? You're muted, bud. You're muted. There you go.
My name's Matt Burke. I own Las Olas Taqueria. We have one unit in Exeter, one in Hampton, and one in Wells, Maine. We have over 100 employees on average, a lot of part-time that we fill through high school students, college students that are putting themselves through school, from management positions that pay their whole way through UNH by working for us full-time, all the way to 16 or 17-year-olds that start with us and stay with us through high school because they do earn a pretty significant wage at Las Olas, averages approximately $20 an hour with gratuity. For a high school kid, it makes it worth them showing up. We have a terrible time trying to find and retain management. Our high management, yes, but assistant managers, $50,000, $60,000 a year, they just can't live in this area. My general manager lives in Hooksett as well. He manages all 3 of my stores. He's just had a baby last week, and he cannot afford to live in this area. And he exceeds the $100,000 a year plateau. It doesn't make financial sense. Darren and I have spoken for, 7 or 8 years about inclusive housing. I lived out west. I saw it in Boulder, Colorado. It's just a phenomenal way of thinking about from a state level, but forcing one town in Exeter or Manchester to carry all the load for all the surrounding towns doesn't make any sense to me. I live in Rye, and I'm, not well liked in the coffee shop when I talk about how we should have more housing in our community. It doesn't fit their MO. The inclusive housing from all levels is something that's really important to me, and I think it has to come from the state level. The governor and the state have to force it upon towns in any new development, to have something so that families can grow in our community. Another business owner tried to open a place in a local community, and they said, you can do whatever you want with this mill building, but you can't put housing in there. And he said, why not? And he said, because housing comes in and it brings families and it affects our school budget. And he said, when did we become anti-family in America? And that's that's where I just stand. I have 3 kids, and I'm lucky. I can afford my kids. And I'm not saying that every town has to carry everything for every kid, but it does hit me in the heart, the inequity of it, that people can't move. I'd love to take a bus to Flint, Michigan and grab hard workers and bring them here, but I have nowhere to help them make an adjustment in their life for housing. So that's just, thank you.
That's really well said, man. Okay, so let's open it up and ask these guys some questions. I'm looking at you, Dave. How about you, Sarah?
I would love to ask a question. So what I'm wondering, thinking about the power, the advocacy power that the business community has. So when I show up as the Workforce Housing Coalition, a local planning board meeting or a select board meeting, town city council, or even at the state level, the legislature, they know what I'm going to say, and so it's much more powerful, and your voice is so compelling, and we still sort of credit the business community for some of those big landmark legislation that's been passed, like the Workforce Housing Law in 2008. What can we do to support your advocacy, knowing just how powerful your voices are, if anything, if that's something that your organization is open to participating in, is putting a little bit of that pressure on the local planning boards or at the state level?
I'll speak that at the state level, I think it's an economic security that we're looking for in the state. And I think I use the word inclusive housing rather than workforce and low income. There's a saying when I was a mountaineering guide called the solution to pollution is dilution. And we keep concentrating problems in our society because I don't want it in Rye. And these problems are economic issues that we need to succeed in our state. We need more inclusive housing for different levels of the median income. And we're not. We're only building, developers are only building $1 million homes or high-level homes in each town. One, because they can't find the workers to come in, the inflationary pressures on the workers alone for the development, to get a carpenter to come to your home today, or an electrician or a plumber. They cannot afford to live here. I'm lucky. I was in the building game. I have contractors that I utilize in my business, but I run the show. I make every decision on everything that happens in every facility. It's different if you were to assign that to someone else. They're going to pick up the phone, and the inflationary pressures that hurt businesses, hurt what you can pay your staff because of what you have to pay to maintain your business in our state is starting to catch up with the Boston area. So,
yeah.
So
Sarah,
Matt, sorry.
Okay.
No, go ahead, Jenny. Sorry.
What I would add is one of the things that we're very aware of with our Manchester community, for example, a very diverse population of people to pull from for workforce, but also access to public transportation has been key. And that's something we also struggle with here, is, we have, if we wanted to pull from that Manchester community, there isn't a way for those employees to get here to work and have reliable transportation.
I couldn't agree more with Gina.
So there are a couple companies, Lint and a few others, that actually bring buses from Haverhill and other places. And I wonder if that's something that, we could be the hub of that information for businesses like yourselves that would want to try to draw and have, an oversized van go to Manchester or what every weekday. I just want to really quickly jump on what Sarah said. Matt, I think it would be easy for him to advocate because he owns the business. He makes the calls and he's a good front man. But I wonder if, in Rachel's case and Gina's case, is there an opportunity? Because this board is very serious about trying to reach out to the other communities and find like-minded people to put pressure on their boards, because there is no state. And Matt, you're right. It should come from the state. But how many workforce bills have gone down this year? 2 or 3. So the state just doesn't have an appetite to force these towns to do it. And that's what that legislation was about. It went down. They didn't even get out of committee. So that said, this board wants to try to get and help put pressure on towns like Northampton, like Rye, like Kensington, et cetera, to try to help us carry the load. To create things like the mixed-use neighborhood development zones that we have, to try to build up that stock of workforce housing or inclusive housing. So I wonder if, would Riverwoods, be able to let Gina to go to a meeting, and would anybody in the banking world be able to go to these meetings and try to put pressure on these and put the light on this so that some of the folks that live in these towns can really see what's going on. So that's my question to Gina and Rachel.
Yeah. I think we have a strong interest in this. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Cambridge itself is very much focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this goes into those efforts. So certainly we would be interested. But on the other side of it, the New Hampshire Bankers Association is a much larger body and does represent more than one institution. So perhaps that would be the lever to pull on in order to create more power.
That's great.
And the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike Summers, he's great.
Yes.
So Robert, Pete, Dave, you guys have any questions? We got these guys here for you.
I mean, I'm pretty, I preaching to the choir here. I guess I'm familiar with all these issues, being on the Housing Advisory Committee and being a planner in this state for a long time. I guess more of a comment than anything else is I agree with Matt that, a state legislation would be, extremely beneficial, because I just don't see there's a lot of teeth in the workforce housing law that was passed, because using words like fair share and so forth that have not really been litigated or defined by the court. I'm not aware of too many people using it. So I think it has to be a multifaceted approach. I mean, because even if you look at state and you put pressure on your legislators, you're talking about this session's pretty much, this session is in session. So, I mean, you're talking about next year. Then if something passed in a year from now, then it has to be implemented and built. So that's kind of a longer term plan. I love the bridge ideas of, providing group transportation and so forth. And meanwhile, this community can reach out locally and regionally to try to, educate folks, because I don't think the state's going to, necessarily be the single answer to this. I think it's going to be a lot of, implementing several ideas at the same time to get this done. Because in Exeter, I mean, we have a very diverse housing stock. We have we allow multifamily in every zoning district except the residential RU, which is rural residential, which doesn't have water and sewer. In every other district we allow it. We have one of the smallest density requirements in the state as far as, square size of lot and minimum lot areas. And we passed the mixed use neighborhood development that, allows people to incentivizes people to build, multifamily units and affordable housing. So it's just, but at the end of the day, the private landowner rights, come in, and, you can provide the incentives and so forth, but then there's the private market, and they're going to have to decide, like Matt was saying, okay, I'm going to build $1 million house. So, and there's nothing really we can control about that at the local level. So I'm all in. I'd be supportive of anything we try. And I just think it should be a multiple pronged approach.
I'll somewhat echo what Davis said and reflect on what Mr. Burke said. Doing regional planning for way too many years now. When we go into the towns, and I guess my underlying point is education is probably where it needs to start, which I think this board is huge for. But we go into the towns and we say things like, well, let's talk about housing and your fair share, whatever terminology we might use. And some boards are open to it and actually function that way. Some boards are open to it and suddenly everything starts disappearing. And then there's the ones who, as Mr. Burke said, just sort of go, and you're getting nowhere. So I'll reflect onto a point in my personal life, sitting on a planning board in the area. We were trying to redevelop an existing mill building. And we had a huge influx of people come out to yell at us on the planning board about how we were being horrible. And what kept getting said was the density is too high, the density is too high. And as we asked people to define that, we realized that they were imagining the existing mill building was going to somehow grow in size. And we were trying to say the building is there. So I think it's all about education, and we need to start at the ground level and say, people, multifamily housing is not scary. It just like this board has said from the beginning, it's here, it exists, look at it, you like that. Show the mills that people love now that are redeveloped, show the multifamily housing that's been done, and then it can start to happen. And one thing I take from the meeting today is I could see Riverworks having an educational session, Riverwoods having an educational session on this that could be very valuable to inform a whole stack of voters who are very influential in the community and say, it's cool, we want this. And that might be one of the more valuable things we could do. Sorry, I've talked a lot here.
and may I add one thing, Nancy?
Of course.
Just for the benefit of our guests, because I know everyone's heard this one from me before, but in your endeavors to try to, convince people of things and so forth, I think one of the key pieces of education is from the financial perspective and tax perspective that everyone can kind of relate to, because a lot of people, I don't know, think this way, but density is like, you get an old mill building, you're just adding dollars upon dollars. You're not adding any new roadways, you're not adding any new water, you're not adding any sewer, you're not adding any infrastructure that you're going to have to maintain, salt, plow, sand. You're just increasing the tax base. And you're not adding anything. Maybe some school impact, but usually multifamily in a mill like that has almost non-existent kids. I've seen several mill buildings get redone, but it depends on the community. But that's from a land productivity standpoint. If you were running a business, you look at this land, you're not going to go out and add another mile of road on 2-acre lots. It just doesn't pay for itself. It's being subsidized by the denser development in towns, in urban areas. So that's always a good point to bring up, because people are afraid of density, but they also don't like to pay pay higher taxes, and that's really that's a benefit of density. It definitely reduces the cost on your town when you use existing infrastructure to add housing units.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. I'm gonna take my turn weighing in. Again, thank you to Gina, to Matt, and Rachel. Our goal here is to try to educate people. We've done a housing map with the help of Rockingham Planning Commission. And the next step, I think we decided, was to have faces and real stories that we can use to educate people. Our not just Exeter, but we want to go, next step is regional, to talk to our neighboring towns, even a few beyond that, if we can get some interest and get them to come and have this conversation, because as Dave said, people are worried about their tax rates going up. And I don't think that there's a clear understanding that businesses bring in the tax funds. They can't survive if they can't hire people. So there's the balance that I don't think people understand that's needed, that we need to educate people on. So this is why we felt it was so important to have our local businesses come to talk to us and use this information to put the reality of the situation out there. We can give statistics, people's eyes glaze over. I wanted to follow up on one thing that we talked about with our group last month, was public transportation. Gina, I believe it was you that brought this up, that Manchester, that's a plus for Manchester, but not much for our seacoast. And I understand the busing part of this too. One of the things that comes back to me is people living local, working local, and then they spend local. So I think one of our aspects that, other than, needing, I like that term Matt used, inclusive housing, that we might want to try to focus a little bit more on too, is public transportation locally, so that people can still shop local. They're not coming in from Massachusetts and then going right back to Massachusetts. They'd be spending their earnings in Massachusetts. And I think one of the things that we might want to look on or expand on a little bit more is being able to employ people locally, live locally, and spend locally. Anyway, so that's it for me. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to ask? Or
Nancy, I just wanted to say that that's such a great point, because there is an organization that comes to my mind, a company in Portsmouth that is busing a lot of their employees up from Lawrence, Mass. every day. And one of the bummers about that, in addition to them having to do that and pay to bus folks up, but is that they're not then going out and spending any of their money in Portsmouth, or going out to dinner after work, or going out to lunch or whatever, because they don't have that transportation here and they don't live in this area. So it's just a really good point.
Yeah, thank you. It's a balance. We want people to be able to hire people. We want the employees to be available to them. So I don't want to appear to sound like I'm saying, busing's a bad idea. It's just looking at the whole picture on that. So.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who is living in a mill building, anecdotally, I look around at my neighbors, and I'm on the much younger side of my community. So my neighbors are not going out and contributing necessarily to the workforce that is keeping our businesses alive. So to your point of having people who are able to live and then walk downtown to Exeter and spend their dollars either in a shop or at a restaurant really is key to have that holistic contribution to the community.
Mm-hmm.
And to Dave's point about the costs associated with housing and density, I just for the hell of it was looking at tax rates in towns like Derry, Exeter, different places, and you can directly correlate with Rye has a $14 tax rate. I pay less tax on my home here than I do on my building in Exeter. It's unjust to the people of Exeter that they carry so much weight compared to what I carry here in Rye. Now we have the billions of dollars worth of housing or whatever on the beach, but that's their choice to build big homes on the beach, and to complain about their tax rate going up is, there has to be a moderation that affords the whole state an economic security that helps with inclusive zoning for families to grow, or the state will not grow anymore. We can't bring families here. We can't grow. People aren't I live off of families. Families come to my restaurant constantly. If I can't get them to live in the area, I can't live on workers, especially right now. Hampton's a perfect example. There's no offices that are open in this time, and our sales numbers are down. But the families that live in Exeter are supporting my business, and the workers, and we're supporting their kids that are working for us. It's a big cycle. It really is important, and that tax rate should not be unjustly thrown upon in the state level on certain communities just because of the economic wherewithal of the housing that's available in that community.
So I have a question, Nancy. So we've had these businesses here. Is the thought process to have sort of package a road show and try to get with some of these other communities? Is it to have when COVID's wanes a big event or something to try to get people to get in the paper and try to invite all these communities and try to lay out what the problem is and have a big long discussion about it? What's the strategy of this board?
Okay, so it's not my sole decision, but this is where our conversations have been going. So last year, as I said, we did a map. It took a few years. We took photographs. Dave Sharples sat down and did all the math to show, what the rates and things like that. And then COVID hit. So we couldn't produce that. And then in talking and strategizing, that's where coming up with our local businesses talking to us, putting faces to the situation. Hopefully by the fall, I'm not being too overly optimistic here. We'll be able to start doing some public events. So what we talked about is so we had some bigger businesses last month. This month, we wanted to focus on more of the service industry part of it to get that perspective. And then our hope is to go regionally next, to invite a conversation with our neighboring towns, some of those businesses, and have a brainstorming session, what their needs are. Matt had some great perspective because I think he does more than just his restaurant. So he gave us a perspective on different ways this can be addressed. So that's our next thing, and we'll be talking about that after this part of the meeting. So if you guys want to stay on and listen, that would be great. But I think the next one will be a more of a regional approach, which we had tried before. We had tried a regional approach with our neighboring towns with representatives from their planning and town managers, and we didn't have a great turnout. So we're hoping that we can do better next time.
If you want help with regional businesses, I'm happy to get them. And I think that if you get the Matts and Ginas and Rachels of the world in these other communities, you're darn tootin' that the staff of the town will show up. They will.
And that's the pressure idea, comes from the business, right? Because Matt, Gina, Rachel, you have no idea how important it is to this committee for you to come here and talk to us. You are our stepping stones. When we hear from you, we can then take your information and decide what our next step would be, how we can best educate people. And I think Matt's right. It does have to come from the governor or the top down in our state, but we might have to approach this from a ladder. Local to go regional to go state. So this is a work in progress, and we're brainstorming on the best approaches to this. So
thanks.
Thank you.
quick question before we jump off and allow you to have the rest of your meeting. Has it ever been considered to have business owners join, but also bring a representative from our company that is specifically commuting from one of these other areas that we've noted, and have them tell their story versus us relaying, because they can go through their thought process and their family situation a little bit more. Have you guys discussed that?
We have.
Great idea.
It is a great idea. And thank you for bringing that up. So the idea was, I think we needed to hear from you first, because you know your employees and their situations. And then, we're hoping that when we get to that point, you could then go to your employees and ask anyone if they're interested in coming forward. We wouldn't know those people without your help. So that is really important. I think when we do our regional meeting, to have people who are willing to come and talk and explain it, kind of like you testify for or against a bill at the State House. It's important. And as Darren said, if we can get local businesses and regional businesses to come together and have a conversation, their local town managers, planners, economic development directors will be there too. So it's all about education, and that's what we're hoping to help facilitate.
I have one other anecdote before we go that y'all made me think of. Just happened yesterday. I have an assistant manager at one of my shops, and she left the teaching profession to stay with us. She was working both part-time with us, and but even teachers have trouble living in this area, especially when they're starting. And if that doesn't hit home with families and voters, it's I mean, we're all selfish. I get it. And then she was crying and she said, "Can I ask you a question?" She needed to borrow some money because when she moved from the teaching profession and she wanted to stay with me, she had the rent and all the different security deposits, and she doesn't have the family. She can't borrow $500 from her dad. She does. And I'm kind of a father figure with my staff a little bit. And, but if that doesn't hit home, it hits me home because I have 3 daughters. I don't know what does hit home. We can anecdote everywhere, but it does come down to the dollar. And if we could get Londonderry and Lebanon and Nashua and all the cities and towns that are carrying the extra weight to come together to go, there's got to be 50% of us that want to make a change in the state as far as communities go. It's just about bringing it together. And I think, Nancy, you're right. It starts here and grows up the ladder to get to the governor.
Yeah, we can say we think that there are other people, but until we hear from them, right? We need them to be willing to come out and talk about this, because that's how people get educated. They're not just, kind of stuck in their own mindset. Oh, we don't want housing because of our taxes, and they don't realize that it all works in a circle, right? I mean, without our business taxes, our personal tax, our home taxes are going to go up if businesses can't survive. Money's going to come from somewhere. We have our infrastructure to keep up, right? So our taxes pay for our services.
We had a sit down with a local rep, and I brought some restaurant folks to my restaurant a couple of election cycles ago, and he was a Democrat. And we were sitting there, and one of the local restaurant folks said, "Hey, how about we raise the gas tax so we can fix this, do that?" And he said, "If we try to raise taxes in this state, we get voted out." And the state doesn't want to raise taxes. And the business owner said, "No, you're wrong. We raise taxes all the time, but there has to be a finite use for that money. The state of New Hampshire doesn't want general fund taxes. But if we could say we're going to add so much to the gas tax for infrastructure, but it highlights or what is it? It sunsets so that once we reach 30 million, the tax is gone. There's no reason we can't do the same for housing or for infrastructure for housing, to give grants or to do whatever to help with certain aspects. Just another side of that when you
Yeah,
mentioned that.
that's an important point. Yes, thank you. Okay, anyone else have any questions or any, these are great brainstorming sessions. Our guests help us to do this. We don't work in your businesses and we don't live your lives. So hearing from you directly is so important. And we do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Absolutely.
Okay, so back to our meeting, this part of our meeting, that was, again, oh my gosh, these conversations are so enlightening. I think a lot of us know these things, but we know it because we read or whatever. Hearing directly from these businesses is so important. So Darren, thank you. I know he's jumped off, but hopefully he knows we appreciate his help. Lindsay, you haven't introduced yourself yet. Would you like to?
I'm sorry. I'm Lindsay Sonnet, and I'm in the room alone, and I had a client emergency, and so sorry to join late.
Nope, I saw you pop in.
I recorded, and I can.
Yes, I knew you were excited, so I knew something came up if you weren't on right away. Okay. So next steps. Anybody have any thoughts? Let me get to a clean page for my notes. Hold on there.
Well, certainly engaging our neighbors, right? And is it this regional meeting we've sort of been talking around, or is it, or it can be lots of different things, right? It can be one-on-one meetings with key people in some of these towns. Sarah and I, in our work with the Workforce Housing Coalition, are doing sort of parallel things to this, which is great, and because any effort is good. But what is next for us?
Ultimately, it's all that work into that storyboard map that was done, that project. I think at some point we're going to probably want to commingle that project with these stories. I don't know quite how yet, because it just came to me when I was listening to our three guests talking. Because we don't want eyes to gloss over, right? We don't want to overwhelm. Statistics are great, but we have to minimize those. So that project that we did was to show what multifamily looks like. Okay, so at some point, I'd like everyone to kind of think about where we could go with that and how we can incorporate that in our steps, just to get that out there.
A quick thought on that, and I think I can do this. It would be interesting if any of those units that we're specifically picking out on the map had a story, and we could link that story to those pictures to that point on that map. So in other words, someone standing there saying, here's the story of this unit. And I think it would make that map more impactful. And I know you guys had talked about a video outside of the map as well, but it would be, in this ideal world where there could be a story for each one of them, maybe even just a historical, this house was blah, and now it is. But if there was other more impactful ones, like we couldn't live here in Exeter if it wasn't for this multifamily housing unit. Mm-hmm. So, even a diversity of videos, but we could embed that into the map, I believe.
Yeah, and so I had talked to Julie Gilman, who is our state rep. She's on our select board and the Heritage Commission, and she's got a lot of historical knowledge, and as does our Historical Society. So I know some of the stories. But I want to make sure what my knowledge is the right knowledge, right? And not just something I was told when I was a kid and might not be 100% accurate, right? Growing up here. So, yes, we the Nike building that I live near, the old Nike building, how that's that has the transformation. Some of our neighborhoods that were mill housing, right, for the mill workers. So because they had to be within so many minutes of the bell, they had to be able to hear the work bells, things like that. So yes, Robert, I agree. As far as inviting people, we probably want to do the next step on inviting. Do we want to try to invite? Sarah, were you behind? It's been a few years, so I can't remember that regional meeting that we had a few years ago. Was that you that was behind that? I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Yes, I was definitely part of it and invited a lot of our community, our neighboring municipal staff.
Okay, so do we want, do we want to continue with the local businesses right now and try that one more time, but with businesses from Brentwood, from Stratham?
I would say yes to businesses from neighboring communities that are lagging behind. I think that is next. I think we're good on Exeter-based businesses. Certainly great to hear from them, but if we really want to have traction.
Right. It's that the next step up the ladder, right? And to stay focused on our businesses because they're the ones with the stories.
Mm-hmm.
Quick question. This is Lovey. I guess part of what I'm trying to also think about is the biggest issue is going to be buy-in in terms of, we all know that the businesses are in need of having affordable housing for their employees. So that's not really the question at hand. The question at hand is, how do we make that viable and how do we get taxpayers to be on board for creating the space, the funds, whatever necessary to have it happen? I'd be curious to see what other towns and cities that are similarly sized to us that have sort of shifted, because I see it kind of as a shift. We've gone from more of a rural suburban community to a touch more urban in some respects with the increase in population, the type of businesses that are now moving in. And so I think that's the trajectory. And it would be nice to see what similar towns, cities, maybe in other states that have a similar path that we have had, what they've done. And have they been successful in creating affordable housing? Has it been a battle? Because I do think talking to other businesses is helpful, but I also know that I think we're going to get the same responses from them.
Yes, we will. So this is my thought process on this. If we want to engage our local, our regional communities, we need to know how many of those businesses in their towns are willing to talk. So if they're willing to come talk to us, we can then, if we can get the neighboring town businesses to talk to us, we can then invite our regional representatives. I call them representatives, but town managers, as I said, town planners, economic development directors, anyone in their towns that are making the decisions, their select board members, things like that. Because I think that's how this conversation is going to grow. But that's why I think it's important that we're taking baby steps, if you will, because growing up here, I can tell you, and things change, but change is hard here. I'm sure everywhere. But I find a lot of people I talk to about this, they still don't want to hear about Manchester. We're not Manchester. We're, Stratham people do the same thing. They want to stay the way they are. So I think what I'm trying to say is we're trying to open up their minds a little bit to understand that, yeah, it's great they have businesses, but their businesses are not going to be able to continue to survive if we don't have housing available. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And actually, Lovey, last night I was listening to a webinar in Cambridge, Mass, about this very problem, which was really interesting. And when I get the link next week on this, I will send it to everyone if you want to watch it. Yeah, Cambridge, it's hard to compare Exeter or some of our regional town, our neighboring towns to Cambridge, Mass, but the conversation was fascinating. So.
Nancy?
Yes, sir.
I hate to be a killjoy here, but what more information are we going to get from our neighboring towns that we don't already now have? I guess, okay, so the point of this is if we can get the neighboring town businesses to participate, then I think we're going to have a better chance of getting their town representatives to participate as the next step after that. But they're mainly going to reinforce what we already know.
I think the point is that the businesses really have the power to put pressure on the town governments that aren't doing anything. So it's us having a conversation with them to say, this is what we're doing. This is how we as Exeter have been successful. Now you need to put pressure on Stratum, etc. The power really has to come from them because we can continue to try to have this conversation with Stratum ourselves, but it's clear that the businesses do have all that.
I can't disagree with you, Lindsay.
They have the weight. Their businesses have the weight. And if they're willing to come talk to us, that I think helps open the door to other people to participate in this and have this conversation. I mean, as Dave Sharple said, Exeter does pretty well with our diversity of housing. But if our neighboring towns don't, that puts all the pressure on us. We need this to be more than an Exeter issue. It is our neighboring towns and our state, frankly.
Nancy, if I could just jump in as well, if you're looking for ideas on how to reach out to those, through Darren, we've been sending emails out for Tim Roach at the RPC. So we have a list of like 12,000 Rockingham County businesses. I don't know how many of them see the emails. We haven't looked into the analytics, but we are sending them out to Exeter and Rockingham County, and we've also done Portsmouth. So it could be something that if Tim wanted to send those emails out, or if you guys wanted to work with him to draft something, we have all of that infrastructure to just reach directly out to the businesses right now.
Excellent. Thank you. That's good to know. Okay, so I think the next step is for me to, because Darren had already, Darren and I talked about this, I think it was last week, that he's willing to help, as Bob just said, reach out to our neighboring businesses. So is that what everyone's open to, that next? And then I think after that, we're going to try to have a regional meeting, of, I don't know quite how to phrase it yet, but it'll come to me, to try to involve not just a few select businesses that want to come talk, but their representatives in their town as well. Anyone?
Yeah, maybe like last time we did it, like, was it Tim Roach or was it Cliff Sinnott? Remember when the folks from Rye and...
It was Cliff.
It was Cliff, yeah. We called it a regional housing summit, and we had some of the decision makers at the table from several communities that came around, and they echoed all our thoughts too. But let's reinvigorate that and get a broader coalition. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it was, Dave, 3 years ago, maybe?
Yeah. The regional housing summit, I think we called it.
Yes. So I'd like to try that again. Yep. But with today's issues, and hearing directly from the businesses, I think is going to be important. I think it's going to make people listen more. it's not just us telling them statistics and what we know. It's better to come right from them. So, okay. So I'm going to reach out to Darren and keep you guys up to date. Dave, I'm so glad you're here. I received an email from Renee Allen, and I didn't see it until last night, and I was in the middle of that webinar in Cambridge, Mass. So can you talk to us a little bit about what she's doing with this green initiative?
Yeah, she's asking all the chairs of the various committees to provide a 1-minute video, and she's calling it the Green Minute video, where each chair spends 1 minute explaining what they're up to regarding, sustainability, energy reducing initiatives. And this fits perfectly into that, promoting, density, that whole thing, instead of greenfield development, promoting infill. There's a lot of ties to what we're doing and the benefit to natural resources. So that would be the focus. It wouldn't be, about economics. It wouldn't be, about traffic impact. It's focused on simply, what it does to improve our, or maintain our natural resources in the state they're in, or improve them.
Okay. And you're going to be participating in this, right? So, and actually Bob Glowacki and I were talking about this before the meeting started, because I knew he was going to be part of this. What's going to be your approach? Is it going to be from the sustainability committee perspective?
No, the sustainability chair. All I'm going to do, I was going to record it last week just on Zoom. I'm just going to provide an intro, just kind of what we're doing, and then pass it off to the chairs. So I'm just going to introduce myself. Maybe I'll fill in some projects, but I guess I was going to wait on that until I got the chairs' videos. So then I could do a specific introduction. And then maybe if I see projects that maybe don't fit in any of the committees, I could mention that. But my focus is just an introduction. Okay. So offline, could I talk to you a little bit more about this at some point?
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you. And once I get to talk to David more about this, is there anybody on the committee that would like to put their face on this on a 1-minute video? Lindsay, I was thinking about
work with you on it.
Not to put you on the spot. We'll talk about it offline once I talk to Dave. How's that?
That sounds great.
Okay, thank you. Just give it some thought. And I did get to talk to the chair of our select board at voting. And I know that will be, they restructure the select board after every vote, after every March vote. But Lindsay and I were so excited about what we're doing on the housing committee. We're both talking both at the same time about it. And he has invited us to come update the select board. And Lovey gives her report after every meeting. And we appreciate it. Thank you so much. So that's something we're going to be looking at too, is going to the select board and talking about what we're doing and where we want to go with it. Did everyone have a chance to look at the draft meeting minutes from our February 12th meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any corrections, anything that I would need to do to tweak them to get them finalized? Are we good with them? Sorry, my allergies are really kicking in, and I'm having can't breathe, can't speak. Okay. What time is it? Okay. Is there anything else that anyone would like to weigh in on? Okay. Robert, your point about those stories, we don't want to let that slide, because I think that's a really good point. So right now the focus, I have a focus for the next meeting, but I do want to continue with that thought process on those, adding some stories to that story map. I think that's important. I know both Lindsay and Sarah had talked about this when we were doing it, that they, and Tim Roach. So I think that is a good thing to add to that. I don't think we're done with that. And that was the idea of the storyboard, was to get to certain points and then see what we could do with it, and kind of tweak it as for new needs or new uses. So thank you for reminding us about that. Okay. So I did not look to see when our next meeting is. It is April 9th. Okay. Sorry, I got to write things down to do my meeting minutes. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. And I will be in touch.